Probably what you've been waiting to hear. I will commit to you today that NDOT has prepared an application for an ARRA fund in the amount of $49 million. We'll submit that application. It's easy for me to say this. I didn't do any of the hard work, so you all did, you and my team. We'll submit that application as required on Friday. And what it calls for, if it's granted, if it's approved, is to fund an environmental and what they call a preliminary engineering study. In other words, what that means in my world, I'm not an engineer, is to take the 2002 study and bring it up to a level of detail that answers many of the questions that we have not been able to answer today. That again, that application would be for the Chicago to Toledo corridor, which includes both the north and south alternative. I will say that NDOT has and still supports the Fort Wayne route, but understand that the economic validation of that route choice from the 2002 study is required by the Federal Railroad Administration and others before it can be made final. Okay? So the study hopefully will validate what the 2002 study, if this is funded, that Fort Wayne is the preferred alternative, and then we're ready to go. If the grant is awarded, it will ready the corridor for final design. It will quantify the economic impact. Third one I think is key, it will quantify the economic viability. And lastly, it will once and for all finalize the corridor route selection, south or north. If south prevails, as I might expect it to, based on what we know today, then the discussion about where it goes will end. But the economic viability discussion just begins. That is an important leap, if you will, of a fence that all of us will have to deal with when and if that report comes in and validates the south alternative. Further speculating, if we are successful in getting the funding, we would expect to be told of that around the end of the year, December 2009. And if we were to win that RFP and get that money, that we would let an RFP to smart people who do this for a living. We would award it to the best consultants that we can find. And we can expect, probably based on history, that a final report would be available in approximately 2 years. If the corridor is economically viable, it would end up with these types of things if it were built. An all-new rail system and crossing protection, to include crossovers and signaling. It would call for the new building of passenger stations, certainly not as grand as this one, but certainly where they would be needed along the route, as well as rehabbing and updating the ones along the way today, including land acquisitions. It would most assuredly call for the addition of track here on the southern route. And the northern route, maybe not. It would depend, because they already have 2 sets of rails, as I mentioned. If the southern route is still recommended and economically viable, then I think becomes the place where all of us have to pause and reflect on what it is we want to do with this. What it will tell us is that it's viable, we think, and it will tell us that the corridor is there and it will accommodate it, they think. But it doesn't tell us how we can pay for it, nor does it tell us how we can operate it after we pay for it. I would be remiss, because there have, I think, been some inaccurate assessments of what our governor feels about this or that. I think if he were here today, he would tell you, as he would if it were mass transit or any other significant economic development initiative, there's 2 pieces to the puzzle. One is you got to do the investment and you got to pay for it, but you got to be able to sustain the operation after it's built. And a lot of piece parts go into that. It's not just, gosh, we wanted it and we'll have X people. It's numbers of passengers and what kind of freight, what kind of intermodal capability might exist between not only this track, but also that highway corridor that I described earlier, which I think really gives some economic synergies, particularly for Fort Wayne, because it all crosses here. I think think your growth potential is phenomenal. But you'll need to determine the stakeholder and taxpayer consensus to continue. You're going to need to determine how to fund it. And frankly, it will require agreements from the current owners of the rail. Those rail lines today are owned by railroads, as are the easements and everything else. They have to come to the table and be a part of whatever this proposition might be. It could be a significant, large investment. My experts tell me, and I'll introduce a couple of them here in a minute. My experts tell me if you kind of run the course and assume that we're successful in getting the grant money, and we let the RFP and we get the study results in 2 years, and it validates southern route, and all of those kinds of things, at that time, in 2011 or probably 2012 dollars, this could easily top $2 billion. And that's our best guess. A lot of money. Does it make it overwhelming to the point you can't do it, but it's a lot of money. And then the other issue is after you get it built, is to sustain it. $2 billion. I would close with this, and then we'll try our best to answer some questions. We support your effort. We support the southern route. Understand that we have to go through the necessary steps and due diligence to meet all the federal requirements, to validate it to a level of detail that all of us as taxpayers expect. And if that is successful, and I truly hope it will be, I would love to be here to begin that process and journey with you. Then I think we're off for the races. So let me pause. Let me introduce, I brought